trauma is an experience that's happening now based on a past event.
Right.
We can start to help someone to be present with themselves, and that can actually be so profound, and it can happen in a very short amount of time.
I'm excited to have TJ Woodward with us on Hope to Hustle. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here. I just am looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. It's always, you're just so inspiring in so many different ways and on so many different levels. So I'm really excited for our conversation. But I really want to get into, you are the founder of Conscious Recovery, which I love. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what that is?
Yeah. Conscious Recovery was born out of my own journey, and then also many years of working in the addiction treatment field. And the foundational principle is underneath all addictive behavior or mental health concern is an essential self that is whole and perfect. And it came out of my own journey of remembering a time when I was so filled with love and joy and happiness as a very young person. And through a series of events called being born on planet Earth, I closed off, I shut down, and I started believing I was broken. And when I started working in the field, I realized that that was the common story, that clients were coming in feeling damaged and broken, and well-intending, for the most part, really well-intending coaches, counselors, therapists, in some ways were looking for what was broken within them. And so I started asking the question, what might happen if we were to start viewing them through a different lens?
I love that. And that's what I love about, working in this field is we're constantly learning ourselves. That I love, things are constantly changing. Unfortunately, even substances are changing, and we're having to keep up with what's going on today and what somebody's using today versus 10 years ago. And it's like, oh my gosh, even in high schools, it's getting younger and younger. 1, 2, it's like, I feel like weed and maybe alcohol was a big thing in high school. And now, fentanyl's even in schools, and it's crazy. And so having different modalities and different approaches, I feel, is extremely important, because there's not one answer. We're all unique individuals, and we gravitate towards different things, and certain things click with us. And with Conscious Recovery, I feel like that it makes you want to say, tell me more, it's not like, oh gosh, this is, and I love meetings. I work for my clients in the 12 steps. But I like my mind to think more for myself. If I don't have an answer, I'll grasp it if I'm able to figure out the answer myself without someone telling me.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying about the multiple different pathways, because that really is my experience. And that's exactly why I created Conscious Recovery, not to replace anything, but to add to. And,
Exactly.
When I started in the field in 2008, there was still kind of a one size fits all approach. There was some nuances there, and, there was a therapeutic approach, and there was 12 step, and there were some different, behavioral modification. There were some different ways we were treating people, but it kind of came down to really variations on one theme. And now we're seeing, all kinds of different perspectives showing up. Someone asked me once, can someone get sober and stay sober on Conscious Recovery alone? And my answer is, I hope not. There's no one answer for anyone. And I love what you said, because, I hear from the treatment programs who use Conscious Recovery, not everyone loves it, but for those who do, it makes a profound difference. It's a different approach.
Right.
And it's something that can be added to or layered in with all the different therapeutic models. And it really then helps us do truly holistic care, which to me is treating the physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. Conscious Recovery really does focus on that spiritual realm.
Right. And what I love about it too, and like you said, I hope not, because we want, like at Bright Future Recovery, we offer different modalities because, treatment's not what it was before, where it was 6 months to 9 months of treatment. It's now, we're fighting tooth and nail for 21 days in residential, including detox. is that's a sliver. That is just, that's just someone barely starting to physically feel well, not even giving enough time to work on, the mental change and growth that they need. So offering different things has been extremely beneficial for our clients, because what I love about 12-step is you can get a meeting anywhere. That's right. Any state, any city, anytime. So if you're on vacation, you need to go to a meeting, it's there. So what I love about, offering conscious recovery at our facility is that they're only there for so long. Once they leave, then it's like, okay, wherever you're going back home to, you can find a meeting. But let's try to grasp everything we can that's different in treatment.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying, because it is true that we have a very limited amount of time. And the curiosity I have about that is, therefore, I hear a lot of people saying, because we have such a short time, we're not going to really do a lot of treatment. We're just going to stabilize them. And I understand the spirit of that. But the issue, as you and I know, and many people who are listening know, is that if we don't actually help someone do some healing, even if it's only in 21 days, to begin that process, we see them coming back over and over and over again. And so in some ways, we're planting seeds for them to do work after treatment. But also, in my experience and in the work I do, there can also be something that can happen in a very profound way in a very short amount of time. I'm not suggesting that someone in 21 days is going to be healed from everything they need to work on.
Right.
What I am suggesting, though, is if we have the idea that we can do some pretty amazing work with people in 21 days and at least help them to have an experience.
Right.
Because, I think a lot of times when we think about trauma, for example, which of course we're all talking about now, and I identify as one of the root causes, we tend to think, or often might think, that it's about re-experiencing the trauma. And there's no way you can do that in the 21 days or 28 days. But really, trauma is an experience that's happening now based on a past event.
Right.
We can start to help someone to be present with themselves, and that can actually be so profound, and it can happen in a very short amount of time.
Right. And I love that. And what I love too is, honestly, TJ, I don't even feel you have to have, addiction to benefit from conscious recovery. I mean, somebody who's just busy and life is chaotic could benefit from just, and calming their mind and learning more about themselves. And that alone can contribute and help, being a mom, being a family member or coworker or whatever it is that they're doing. So I would love to see it be offered even just for anyone.
It's interesting. My third book is called Conscious Creation, and I call it Conscious Recovery for Everyone.
I love it.
Because so many people say, oh, I'd love to read your book or do your work, Conscious Recovery, but it doesn't apply to me. Right. And so we could take a very broad definition of addiction and realize, especially in the United States, we're a highly addicted culture, addicted to drama, addicted to vision, addicted to our devices, to shopping, to sex. I mean, we could list all of it.
Right.
But for those who don't really identify themselves as being in recovery, I did write Conscious Creation, which is really the similar principles about how we get in and heal the core false beliefs and what's trapped in our unconscious that's really running the show, so that we can start to make conscious choices in our lives instead of being run by those programs that some of us aren't even aware are present.
Right. Yeah. Ooh, so is there like a retreat coming soon? Sign me up.
Okay. That's a good idea. I like it.
I like it. Yeah. I think that would be great just to go. Yeah, so is your book out already?
Yeah, that one came out. It was interesting. It was going to come out, and then this thing called COVID happened, and I kind of postponed it a little bit. As a matter of fact, I had a Conscious Creation retreat scheduled, I think for that spring, April or May of 2020. So I kind of put everything on hold a little bit, but it did come out about 2 years ago. And so it's out. As a matter of fact, a new course is launching this week on Conscious Creation.
I love it.
Yeah, so there's a lot coming in that.
Is that on Amazon?
It's on Amazon.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I'm going to order that.
Perfect.
I need that. Now, how did you how long have you been working in the field?
2008.
2008. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, long time.
Well, it's interesting because I got sober in 1986 and I promised myself I'd never work in the field because I saw so many of my friends like getting sober and going to work in treatment and all the different layers of that. And I just didn't think that was my path. And somewhere around 2005, I kind of had this awakening where I realized and it was around it was when I turned 40. What am I? I'm doing math, right? So a lot of times I hear, Carl, there are a lot of people who point to 40 being a pivotal moment of like, what am I here to really do? And that was my experience. I had a successful furniture business and I was very happy in many ways, but there was this deep longing that I wanted to somehow contribute more to the world. And so I went back to school at 40 years old, spiritual leadership, spiritual direction, 5 years of school. And I started a spiritual community and I accidentally started working in the field in the midst of that.
Accidentally. You promised yourself you wouldn't do it.
Right. But I was over 20 years sober when I started and I'm grateful for that.
Right.
And I also we know Shannon Clay, she started working in the field when she was new and she's been in the field for like 37 years and sober for like 39 or something insane. So like there are people who do it well. And I'm also grateful that I waited.
Totally. Yeah. And I think because I've seen it go both ways where some it helps the recovery and some it could almost be a little bit of a burden, for their own personal recovery. And so for you at that time, it was probably it was a necessary step in your recovery to do what you were doing and then reevaluate and accidentally slip right into it later.
And that kind of is one of the songs that I sing, if you will. I go into treatment programs and do a one-day experience. And the one-day experience is really about helping clinicians, people, counselors, coaches, therapists reconnect with their passion and purpose, and ultimately playing with the idea that the only thing I really need to do for my clients is my own healing, right? And that's why I think I'm really grateful in retrospect that I had, done a little bit more at 20 years sober than I did when I was 20 months sober.
Right.
And then I was in a more unique maybe a place in my life where I could be more present for someone without wanting to jump into the fixing, which I see happening in our field a lot. People are burnt out and it's also not that effective.
Well, it's funny that you say that because I got sober really young and I quickly started working in the field. Yeah. And it's not that anyone told me that working in the field would be helpful to my recovery. I assumed that I was continuing to do my own work by working in the field. I work in the field. So therefore, this is what I need to stay sober. And to some degree, yes, that absolutely was the case. And it was very, very helpful for me personally. But after so many years, I started realizing, okay, I'm getting a little burnt out here and I'm not doing anything for my recovery. I mean, that's up until just a few years ago that I finally was like, okay, I'm getting overwhelmed. I'm getting snappy. I'm not patient at home with my kids and my staff, and the company is growing. I'm not able to handle this. And it was like I felt a sign of weakness that, okay, well, who can I talk to about this? Who can I go to my staff and say, like, I'm overwhelmed. I need to do something for myself. And that was a really hard decision because there was a lot of shame and guilt around that, even though there shouldn't have been. And, you just had the Emergence Conference, which I loved. And thank you for having me be a part of that because we had some amazing conversations. I mean, the most authentic conversations I think I've ever had working in this field. Right. Where we were able to talk about that, what, everybody feels that way. Let's talk about it and let's do something about it because for a long time, I didn't feel I was able to do that. And it's like, if I checked into therapy or had to do anything of that sort, is everyone going to turn and question, is she doing okay? Where it's like, I'm doing fine, but I might be losing my shit a little bit,
Well, and I love your pointing to this because I think about sort of the stereotype of like the mechanic whose car is never running, right? Because they're always busy fixing everyone else's.
Yes.
Right. It's that way in our field, or it can be, right? And I think a lot of times we come into the field because we want to make a difference in the world. And of course, that's an admirable thing. And that is what drives us, honestly, because if not, I don't think we could possibly do the work. work because it's intense. There's an interesting point where we might be focusing on helping others when we're not looking at what needs to be healed or what needs to be tended to within ourselves.
Right.
And that's why at Emergence, our topic this year was healing the healer. So we brought people together to, like you said, have a really authentic conversation, because I don't know what it is, but maybe it's we get a degree or we start a program or, we get into a role and then suddenly it's like, oh, I should have everything together, which is the opposite of what we know in our field.
Right.
I remember when I first started working in the field, I'm like, we are trying to teach our clients about self-care, but we're not really doing it, right? Like we're not even taking breaks.
Exactly.
So there's some stuff for us to look at, not from a place of judgment, but from a place of curiosity about how I can do my own work, if you call it work, my own spiritual work, my own healing work, then I'm more present for my clients. And of course, we know then we're more effective, but also the work becomes energizing.
Absolutely. And I feel that, it almost was the challenge. I feel like that's the addict in me. Everything is a challenge, right? And the more that I'm here for other people, I felt more capable. I felt like I was of service, that I'm still answering the phone at 11 p.m. because mom needs to just call in and cry and vent, and I'm there for her. And I did that 7 days a week for over 8 years before I started realizing I need to have some boundaries with that. And my self-care looks a lot different today than it did years ago. I thought I was doing the right thing by always being here, always answering the phone, and I am at so much more peace and a lot calmer in conversations with my team, with family members. I mean, I've even made up some damage with previous clients and families that I've had that I knew I was not in a mentally good space, and I was completely overwhelmed and burnt out, that I'd even get a little snappy with my clients' families. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the heart that I have, I look back and I think about it and I'm like, oh my goodness, like I think I owe them an apology. And I've actually been able to do that. Like, hey, how are you? I know it's been many years, but also with age, I started my program at 24 years old.
Yeah.
Naturally, I'm going to mature with time, and become wiser with time. I was really young. And so it's like, I apologize to, any families out there if young Cheree was, a little edgy and just trying to figure it out myself. But I'm thankful that I am in a place that I am able to have this conversation and be open about it and take that responsibility, because that's something I was taught so early on in my recovery, is take responsibility for your own actions and not point that, well, they were, attacking me and they were blaming me. And they, we are working in a field where crisis is at everyone's fingertips. It's crisis mode, and they are depending on us to be their safe spot to be able to get through whatever it is that they're going through. And so those boundaries I've set, and I love that for me.
Yeah. And you're such a perfect demonstration. And I just want to applaud you for taking that time to realize, I know you took some time and went and did some intense work. And like that healing that you went through now provides so much more, you're more available for yourself. And when we think about boundaries, we often think about having a wall, like a boundary is like, don't cross this line. But what I'm hearing you saying is like, oh, I need to check in with myself and realize. And for myself, I realized very early on, and, Kathleen Murphy talked about this when she spoke at Emergence, and I loved it. It was so subtle. It was just a moment. And I was just so connected with her. And she said, and sometimes we want to be the hero. Right. And that was my early journey. Even, though I'm like, oh, I waited till I was 20 years sober, there was a high that I got from watching people transform. And it was a beautiful thing, but it's almost like I became addicted to that. Right. And so I did pride myself on, oh, I can work 12 hours. I can work 14 hours. And then there was a point I realized, oh, what is this really about? Not is it bad or wrong or good or bad. It's more, what is this creating? Right. And so the boundary isn't a wall for someone. It's something that I realize that here's a line that I'm not going to cross, because when I do it, I find myself in hero mode. And I remember I got to meet Bessel van der Kolk recently, and we were doing check-ins, and someone checked in, give me the hardest clients. I'm available 24 hours a day. And, I'm the person that will be on the front lines with the most difficult clients. And Bessel very gently, but very clearly said, I used to be that too, and realized I needed to do some more healing.
Right.
And it was just the courage of him to say that. And it was so profound.
Yeah.
Because if I'm not focusing on myself and what it means to truly be present, then I move into let me be the hero here. Let me fix this person. Let me see them as broken. And that's the system that I think we've been in, where we're seeing people come back over and over and over again.
Right. And a level of control. It's controlling the situation, and I can take charge, and I can do this and I can do that. And I still have that, about myself. But I've gotten much better, because even with the company, it's I have an amazing team, and being able to delegate was something that was so hard for me for many years, where it's I'll just do it myself, where it's no, you have a team willing to learn, willing to take that off your plate, let them. And it makes everything so much smoother for all of us when we're able to say, and plus it's better for our families when, I'm going to pass this off to somebody else who has, a little maybe more knowledge on the situation, maybe haven't been working as many hours, because I feel I'm also doing a disservice to that family when I'm been working all day and it's 11 o'clock at night. You're not going to get the version of me at 10 a.m., fresh, ready for the day either, to be able to answer that question. So it's beneficial to everybody. And I love that you said the boundary is not just do not cross this. It's really just also discipline. I feel having those boundaries for myself has also helped with self-discipline in a positive way. Making sure that I am going to the gym for myself. That is the best way for me to start my day. I go to bed at a decent time at night so that it's the routine. And we're also teaching our clients routine is healthy.
Right.
As simple as just making the bed in the morning. That is such a simple task that also, falls out of place when you're going through, addiction or whatever it is that they're struggling with, to be able to just make the bed. And when you come back in the room, no matter what type of day you've had, there's something about a bed made that feels so great and welcoming and safe. So yeah, I love that you are providing those tools for people in recovery, in addiction, struggling with trauma, or just the average person. Sounds like your third book is for. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I absolutely love that. And so you got sober in
1986.
86. Okay.
I know, that's a while ago.
Wow. Did you go through a program?
I did not.
You did not. Okay.
Yeah. I got sober in 12-step.
Okay.
Yeah. A friend of mine had gotten sober, and I was in this sort of notorious nightclub, and it was a year of a lot of deep searching, let's put it that way. And I felt so bankrupt. The outside of my life wasn't completely falling apart. That's another paradigm that I want to see us change. We don't have to lose everything or hit bottom in order to want recovery. But what was true for me is I felt so deeply disconnected with myself, and I was trying so desperately to connect with others through drugs, through sex, through being at this nightclub, through looking good, through having the right job. And I was, 20 years old, and I felt so broken and so damaged. And when I got into recovery, there was this moment where it was just so magical for me. I felt so grateful. And that lasted for a year. And then around maybe 18 months sober, I found myself suicidal. And the paradigm at the time sounded like, don't worry about anything but not drinking. Your life is a miracle. Go help someone else. And I thought, well, but why do I want to die? And I met this woman who changed my life. Her name is Mary Helen, and she took me on a journey of recovery that really has become, that journey of reconnecting with my true nature became the foundation for conscious recovery all those years ago, because I realized that recovery wasn't about moving toward or attaining something. It was really about unlearning all the stuff so that I could return to this essential truth of who and what each of us is. We're all this perfect being. We come in that way, right? And so that journey through, studying Eastern philosophy and doing all sorts of different things, but all of it led back to this one truth. And that was the whole time I've been looking out there for everything and it's already been here. I just couldn't remember it, or I didn't have the ability to.
I love that. And so what sparked your interest of getting sober, just feeling broken? Was there family involvement at all? Any intervention?
No, my family. Just me. I was just me out there feeling empty. I look back and, there were these moments, these pivotal moments. Like I remember I overdosed one night and didn't tell anyone. I was literally like convulsing on the floor of my friend's house and did not tell anyone. And, one would think that would be like, oh, maybe I should. But, there was no thought of that. It wasn't until I ran into a friend of mine and I saw a light in his eyes. And he said, yeah, I got sober. And, now I know it's so interesting. When I saw him, this was in October of 1985. It was around Halloween, and I remember seeing that light in his eyes. And I know now he was 10 days sober because I know he's October 21st. He's still my friend, right?
Yeah.
But 10 days seemed like an eternity to me. Like that, I could relate to that at that point. And that was October, and it was not until June of 86 that I got sober. But there was a seed planted there, and it wasn't just planted in my mind. It was like, oh, there was something about him. And so then I had the overdose and the emptiness, and then I ran into him again, and I said, hey, are you still sober? I mean, I didn't even really know what that meant. But I'll do anything. Right. Yeah. So that's how it began.
And it's so crazy when you're in such a bad place. I remember when I was using, I was working at Verizon at the time, and everybody that would come in, they just seemed so happy. And I'd be like, what are they on? Okay. And then I started guessing. I'm like, they're doing cocaine. That one drinks wine probably every day. And I'm trying to attach their happiness with a substance.
Interesting.
Right?
That's all you could see, right? That was your reality.
I'm like, because there's no way they are that happy sober.
Yeah.
And I lost that in me. I couldn't find happiness no matter how high I got, how much I had on me, how much money I had for that day, because the next day I could be completely broke. There was nothing filling that void at all. And so I attached everybody else with the substance too, because I'm like, I'm not gonna sleep good. It was at that point just so dependent on something to, a movie needed to enjoy a movie. I needed to be high. To enjoy a bowl of cereal, I needed to be high. To get rest at night, I needed to be high. I'm like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
And so I really became curious. Is there a way to be happy again sober? And when I got sober, I'll never forget, my mom reminds me still when she came to visit me, she's like, I was totally tripping out that you were noticing all of the trees and how green they were. And she's like, I almost thought you were high at the moment because you kept pointing out the trees and the flowers,
right.
And something that someone else just doesn't even pay attention to. Yeah. Someone in fresh recovery, I think I was probably only 2 weeks sober, but I was like, everything seems so bright, it's not dull anymore. And I was recognizing and wanting to smell everything. And I'm like, my gosh, I just totally lost touch with myself and reality. And so gaining that back 10 days seemed impossible at the time. So I could imagine seeing somebody and being like, wow, and early on in my recovery, I mean, I remember getting picked up from jail from 2 counselors from the program. And I was so curious to know, their stories and how long they had. And one was only, I think she had 60 days sober, maybe, and the other had like 4 years. And instantly I became inspired by that. And not, this person has this and I'm not going to be able to do it. It was inspiring me instantly that, okay, whatever it is that I need to do, I don't care. I don't want to be back in the situation that I was in, and I'm going to give this thing a try. I'm going to try sobriety. Worst case scenario is I just get to go back to drugs. Right. So that was reassuring to me, knowing like, if I don't like this whole experience, well, I can just go back to the lifestyle that I was living, which is a bad mentality, but it got me through the days because I knew I could go back if I wanted to. But each day got better.
It's so interesting. There was a cliche back in the day. I don't know if people still say it, but give it a try for 30 days. And if at the end of that, you're not happy, we'll refund your misery. People used to say that. And I understood that because, what I'm aware of as you're talking is there is a part of me, or certainly at that time, there was a part of me who really wanted to be present and be open and be sober and learn how to connect with people and learn how to love myself. And then there was a part of me who honestly didn't really even think I was worthy or capable of that. And so it was sort of like a WT, it's like, why bother?
Right.
Why bother? And so there was this cycle of like, I'm not even worthy of that anyway. And so what I'm hearing you saying is like the part of you who was aware that it's possible and seeing it in someone else gave you that hope to move forward. And that's really why so many recovery groups work, because if nothing else, you walk in and you have a room full of people who can demonstrate that it's possible. And that is so powerful.
Absolutely. And that's what I love about my colleagues. I mean, you guys are all like my family, and I always tell people too, I'm like, I'm sure you have great coworkers, but I really have cool coworkers. Like they've all got a story. And they're all the most down to earth people because, we've all partied, we have a level of like, we don't care. We've been there, done that, a level of fun and the level of gratitude that we have because of all of our experiences in the past and just so broken. We've found love and gratitude through our journeys. Yeah. And I feel so blessed. Just to be able to communicate with my team and colleagues and conferences. It's like some people are like, oh, I don't want to go to a conference. And I get it. But at the same time, I love seeing everybody. Yeah. I love seeing everyone, getting together for dinner. And so Emergence was amazing. And I want to see more of that. I definitely want to see, even if it's not Emergence and it's just once a year, but something that we could do or even a meeting that authentic, just to be able to talk about it without it feeling like a meeting, if that makes sense. Yeah. I gained a lot from that. And I was like, and I went to, oh my gosh, my mind is blanking right now. In Nashville, the 5-day trauma retreat on site.
On site.
Have you gone?
No, but I hear it's incredible.
It is phenomenal.
I saw your transformation.
Did you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Just in that time. Isn't that crazy? Well, and they had said too, you all see a 2 degrees shift because I remember getting there and everyone was like, I don't think I can last. I don't want to stay here. I don't want to do this. And I'm like, it's 5 days. And I even started thinking that way. I'm like, oh, come on, Cheree. You did treatment for 7 months. What is 5 days? You're fine. I'm like, do not be that person. But by the end of it, to see everybody transform and then gain fear to go home when everyone couldn't wait to leave the second they got there was amazing. And they had to do an entire course with us on how to go back into our reality because we were so fearful of losing everything that we gained in that short amount of time. And what if I don't apply this? And what if it just falls out, and I just completely forget? And then I came here for nothing. And so they said a 2 degree shift, and that 2 degrees will become 4 degrees and 6 degrees and 10. And it will just start going like this in yourself. And I thought, how interesting.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before. And sure enough, just over time, what would have bothered me a couple years ago, I'm like, that's not a big deal, And that's just the inner healing. And it made me more open-minded and curious to continue that for myself. Because I'm like, I can't believe it took me this long to go do something for myself after doing treatment back in 2012, Yeah.
And that's the journey, right? And I love this 2 degree idea because, we can often talk about that in the reverse. It's like, we lose sight of ourselves just a little bit and these behaviors and then the addiction, and we end up way over here and never even realized it happened, but it can be reversed in that same way. And I love that. And perhaps that's what we do at treatment, right? And, because you named it, and it's the insurance companies, right? They're the ones that created the 28-day model anyway. None of us would have ever said, no, you'll be fine after 28 days, right? So now it's 21 or 14. So we do what we can, but even if we give someone a different possibility and there's a small shift, and that's what my hope for conscious recovery is. And when clients do a conscious recovery group, I don't want them walking out with any new answers. And it almost sounds controversial. It's like, what do you mean? I don't want them walking out with new tools, because they get that already.
Right.
I want them walking out of a conscious recovery group saying, right? Then it's a little shift.
Right.
There's a whole group on the power of perspective, right? And for some people, especially early in addiction or early in recovery, to say we create our reality based on our lens, and our lens comes from what's unhealed within us that's unconsciously created. They might not be able to do that yet. Now they might, but just the exercise that's in that group allows them to go,
right.
We did all see that differently. And then we don't have to talk about that. We let them have that experience and then go out into the world. And obviously they're getting all kinds of other treatment. So it's just one piece of it. And you named it. It's curiosity.
Right.
Let me be curious about this.
How do you feel we could open others' minds to becoming curious about internal change and growth who are completely closed off to it? Have you encountered, is there a way to utilize conscious recovery in maybe an intervention, or you know what I mean? Yes. Somebody who just, I'm perfect. I don't need counseling. I don't need therapy, right? We hear that a lot. My husband was one of those.
I've been one of those.
We've all been one of those. And he actually went to on-site this year.
Oh, wow.
Yes, that was huge. I was like, what? Are you really going? I'll believe it when you're on that plane. And it's so funny because we say the 2-degree shift. He says, oh, I'm 2 degrees less shitty. I'm like, oh, please. And I love it. And
that's beautiful.
It is. And you know what? I'm slowly starting to see that transformation too. And I'm like, I love this. I want this for everybody. But, we do come across, we are all open-minded, especially if we've gone to treatment for substance abuse. But everybody can benefit from some trauma healing. And, we all have a past. So I would love to be able to open people's mind who are, I don't need anything. I'm fine. I'm perfect. I don't believe in therapy.
Yeah.
How could we help them gain that?
Well, the way, and we really work with this in the one-day experience I do when I go to programs, because I find that a lot of times we are negotiating with the part of our clients who don't want to be there, right? Like they're leaving, they're upset, what we call AMA, against medical advice. And we try to talk them into staying. And so instead, like, let's say someone's really close to the idea that they need to do any growth. Let's be curious about that, because if I'm wanting them to be curious, then I want to be curious, right? And it's much more than just asking questions, because the truth is life is energy. So if I am, while they're, in their resistance, if I have a judgment about that resistance, they're going to feel it. Or if I think they shouldn't be resistant, they're going to feel that.
Right.
And so that's really where the deeper work comes for me, because do I have a point of view about what I want them to do? Absolutely. And what gets created when I lead with that, or like, oh, let me check that. Right. And we hear clients referred to as treatment resistant, drug seeking, entitled, unwilling, not ready, haven't hit bottom. All the labels we put on our clients, and like, okay, let's set all that aside and look at this human being sitting in front of me and realize that very defense, let's say it's a defense strategy, which I call a brilliant strategy, might be the number one thing that they feel is keeping them safe. So I don't want to be at odds with that.
Right.
And so if we can name it and then have a conversation about that, that's why I will often just say, what are you noticing right now? What are you experiencing at this moment? Because they might realize that they are, they have some tightness energetically. And what happens is we start to develop a deep sense of trust, because life is energy and they feel it. And so it doesn't really matter what I say, right? That's why when we go learn all these different modalities, like, a lot of different modalities. There's a technique we learn, and that technique can be helpful, but it only takes us so far, because really it's like, how am I being with you right now?
Right.
And they feel that. So if I'm just curious with someone and I can see past whatever that structure of defense is, they might have a higher probability of experiencing it. And then that's a felt sense that happens in the room.
Okay. I love that. What about for kids?
Oh, yeah. What about for kids? Well, we do have a conscious recovery for teens workbook.
Okay.
It's not really kids. We're moving that direction. I co-authored that with Dr. Jessica Bird Olmsted, who is a wonderful human, lives in this area of the world. And she's an expert with adolescents, because the concepts of conscious recovery are so applicable to a teen, because the teen archetype is like, I'm fine, I've got this, right? And that's just like, we identify core false beliefs and brilliant strategies. It's one of the core concepts in conscious recovery. So we have these core false beliefs, and those core false beliefs become a vibration. And we're walking around emitting that vibration, and we experience it over and over again. And if that sounds out there for anyone, it's actually just pure science, right? It's pure science. Like, animals are very instinctually attracted to energy, aware of energy. They know who feels safe and who doesn't. So if I'm walking around believing I'm broken, people feel that, and I'm going to end up choosing and attracting people to confirm that.
Right.
So in the adolescent workbook, we call it superhero and inner villain. Right. And so, or we could call it a superpower, superpower, inner villain. Which one do I want to focus on?
Right.
Right. And we're very clear to say the inner villain, even though that sounds harsh, it's not a bad thing. It's just these core beliefs we have about ourselves, and we're afraid to show. So this brilliant strategy comes in, or this superpower or superhero that's like sometimes the opposite. I'll show you, I'm so strong. Right. Really, I'm afraid.
Right.
And so we start to have that conversation with the teens of like, which one do you want to focus on right now? And then they start to become aware of these different parts of themselves and which one they want to feed and water, honestly.
Right. Yeah. And I feel that it's important for kids. I mean, because now being a mom, and my oldest is almost 10, trying to recognize his feelings. And for him to be in tune with those feelings too, and letting him know that it's okay also. And I feel like in schools, they didn't really teach us that too much at all.
Right.
And so I want to see that become a thing in schools for our children, that naturally, we in our field, we use anxiety and depression. Right. And for me, we all have anxiety and depression.
Of course.
What that looks like, and we don't want to maybe use that word with our youth, but if you go to take a test, you feel nervous, which could be a level of anxiety.
Right.
How do we deal with that? If you change jobs, even if you've been in that career for 20 plus years and you just go down the street to another office, you're going to feel nervous, because of that change. And so I want to be able to provide that with our kids, and education around, substance abuse and drug ed, and bring that back, because I'm not seeing it as much anymore at all in our schools.
Well, I think there's an idea here for a conscious recovery for kids workbook. And what I think of, or what shows up for me in the midst of this, is exactly what you're saying, and the fundamental message that they came in as a whole and perfect being, and that's who they are. Right. And all this stuff that happens, because so much of my trauma happened in junior high, grade school, if it happened at home, it happened in different places, but the messaging I received was it wasn't okay to be me.
Right.
Even though no one came to me and said, it's not okay to be you. But there were teachers. There were teachers who saw me and loved me, and I could feel that. And there were some that felt really judgmental, and I didn't feel smart enough, and all the layers. And so a conscious recovery for kids workbook would be amazing, because they could start to identify that. And as you said, then become more aware of their feelings. So
yeah,
good idea.
I think it would be great, and started in these small schools. And how do you deal with those emotions when you're sad, and when you're scared, and that it's okay to talk about it, and find that person that you feel comfortable and safe with. And if they do that together in a school setting to where everybody is aware versus just at home when they're learning these things, well, okay, now I know what I'm feeling, but I go to school and it's like, okay, what are you talking about? But if everyone's learning it together, it's opening their minds and becoming a safer space for them to be able to acknowledge how they're feeling, talk about how they're feeling. And I want that to become the new normal. Yeah. Because before it's don't talk about it or you can't feel that way.
I love this. We might be planting a seed here right now.
Yes.
I think we just did.
Yeah. Drug education is like on my to-do list. I know I had mentioned that briefly at the Emergence Conference, but I really want to see, I met with some kids last week and spoke on their podcast, but I was impressed. I was like, we're not seeing youth doing these things, at such a young age. And they are just a group of kids that were so positive, and some that have already gone through a lot, and they're embracing it and talking about it. I'm like, wow, I have not come across adolescents like this ever, I don't think.
Well, it's interesting because this next generation is all about process and authenticity, right? And I think our educational system in some ways is starting to see that, and they obviously have a long way to go. But when I was growing up, there was one learning style, one teaching style. Right. Memorization and regurgitation. That was it, right? It was all in the mind, and you were smart if you could memorize all this. Right. And younger people today, and this shows up, this is going to show up in our recovery circles too, because this idea that you're defective in some way, or you're damaged or you're broken, I don't think this generation is going to buy into that. Right. Right. Like the root of your problem is selfishness. Right. There's something below that, right? The selfishness or the self-centeredness is a strategy for something. And so I think kids, what do I know? But it seems to me that like kids want to be in authentic conversations now, not be spoken to or taught.
Absolutely.
Talked at.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I agree. So if you were in any crisis situation or in fear, is there any sort of saying or quote or anything that you hold on to that you would like to share with our listeners?
It's interesting. What came to mind when you asked that instantly is usually we'll say something like, everything's going to be okay. I actually would invite someone to pause and say, I am okay in this moment. Right. And to become aware of what's happening in our bodies and just pause and take a deep breath. I'm okay in this moment. Whatever I'm experiencing is perfectly okay. One of my closest friends suddenly lost her husband 4 weeks ago, and she's obviously been in just, a trauma response, and appropriately so. And I think a lot of times people, well-meaning, try to say things to make her feel better. Right. But that's not really what one needs during that. Right. It's like, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be happy. Right. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to have all of it. Right. And so if I was going to say anything, it would be whatever I'm experiencing is perfectly okay. And I'm safe in this moment.
I love that. TJ, thank you so much
for
coming
Cheree.
on. I mean, this was a great conversation, and you're doing amazing work for, not only our fields, but just individuals out there. So you are a blessing to so many. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Cheree. I love this conversation.